Okay, packet number 3, simplifying expressions. Let's jump right in. Question number 1. Which expression represents the sum? The sum, which means addition, of 2x minus 5y and x plus y. So we have the sum, right? So it's going to be 2x minus 5y plus x plus y. Let's just add them all up together. Remember, x's talk to other x's. We have 2x here plus an x, because remember this operation, the operation to the left carries with the term. So we have 2x plus x. That's going to give us 3x. So we're good there. And we have negative 5y plus y. So that's negative 5y plus y, which is going to be, remember, if we remember, you know, we're just working on a number line here. Here's 0. We start out at negative 5 and we plus 1. We're going to get to negative 4y. So there we are. If we just look at it again, negative 5y plus 1y is going to be negative 4y, because you're at negative 5 and you move up 1 to negative 4. So we have negative 4y, but we have 3x minus 4y. 3x minus 4y. And we're good. Okay, next question. Question 2. Which expression is equivalent to 7x minus 5 in parentheses minus 3x minus 2? And this is the tough part, no doubt about it, of this question. Because what you have to remember is when you have a subtraction of a whole other term, it gets tricky. The way I think about it is adding the opposite, and you can always add the opposite, right? So adding the opposite would be like multiplying this whole other term by a negative 1. So you have 7x minus 5 plus negative 1 times all of this, which is 3x minus 2. Now, negative 1 times 3x, that's the one people will generally won't forget to do, and you're going to get minus 3x. But you also have to remember to have this negative 1 and multiply it to this negative 2 as well, and you're going to get plus 2 for that. So press pause if you have to, take a look at this, review your notes, but this is the part everyone's going to get wrong. They're going to see this minus this other term, and they're going to forget that that means this minus 2 here is going to turn to adding 2. Why? Because you add the opposite. It's like multiplying this whole expression by a negative 1. So 3x becomes negative 3x, and plus 2, because negative times a negative is a positive, becomes minus 2, because negative times a negative is a positive, becomes plus 2. Okay. Once we do the hard part, the easy part is easier. We have 7x minus 3x gives us 4x. And we have minus 5 plus 2 gives us minus 3, right? Because you're on a number line. Here's 0. Here's negative 5, and you add 2, you're going to get to negative 3. And that's going to be our answer. 4x minus 3. And we're good. Okay, question 3. The 3 steps shown below were used to find an expression equivalent to 2/5 parentheses 15x minus 30y in parentheses plus 10x. Here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. Which expression could be used as step 1? Well, obviously, for step 1, we have to use the distributive property, right? Because step 2 and step 3, or step 2 has just 16x minus 12y. So we know we're getting rid of this parentheses in step 1. And to do that, we're going to multiply 2/5 times the numbers inside the parentheses. And we're going to keep plus 10x, because that's just going to be kept. So right away we know that choice A is bad, because we're going to have to keep plus 10x. Okay, so what do? We multiply 2/5 times 15x, and we're going to have subtraction. We have 2/5 times 30y. 2/5 times 15 can be thought of as 15 over 1, right? So we have 2 times 15 is 30 over 5 times 1, 5x minus 2 times 2/5 times 30 can be thought of as 2/5 times 30 over 1. 2 times 30 is 60. 5 times 1 is 5. And here's the y. This simplifies. 30 divided by 5 is 6. So that'd be 6x minus 60 divided by 5 is 12. So 12y. And remember, we have plus 10x. Or plus 10x. And which one there fits? We have 6x minus 12y plus 10x. It's B. We're good. Okay, question 4. Which expression is equivalent to 4.8 plus 2.2w minus 1.4w plus 2.4? And you look down at the answers and we have not only simplification but also factoring going on. Okay, so we can do this. First, let's combine like terms. We have 4.8 and 2.4. There's no variables. They can talk to each other. We can add them together. And what do we get? We get 7.2. Then we have plus 2.2w minus 1.4w. So they can talk to each other, right? They're both w's. They can talk to each other. And what do we get when we have plus 2.2 minus 1.4? We have plus 0.8. And don't forget the w. Okay, so we're good. We have 7.2, which is, 72 divided by 10, plus 8.8w, which is 8 divided by 10. And thinking about it that way, it might pop into our head that 72 is divisible by 8, and 8 is certainly divisible by 8. So we can factor out of this expression, we can factor out of it a 0.8, and that'll get us here 0.8 times 9 gets us 7.2, and here we just are left with the w, and that's our answer. It's right there. It's B. We're good to go. Okay, on to question 5. Which expression represents a factorization of 32m plus 56mp? And you see our answers all pull out an 8, and we're left with some other work to do, but they all pull out an 8. So, that makes sense, right? Because 32 is divisible by 8 and 56 is divisible by 8. So let's go ahead, and the first thing let's do is pull out an 8. And 8 times what gets us 32? It's 4, right? So the 4m is left because the m is untouched. And we have plus 8 times what gets us 56? Well, it's 7, right? So we have 7mp because the mp is not touched. Now, is there more work we can do? And yeah, absolutely. We have an m here and an m here. So let's drag that out. Let's drag that m out. And we have 8m because the m's dragged out now. And what do we have left? We have a 4 left, and we have a plus 7p left, right? Because nothing touches the p. 7 and 4 are still left, and there we go. 8m parentheses 4 plus 7p. And that's our answer. On to question 6. These are good practice. We have which expression is equivalent to 8c plus 6 minus 3c minus 2. So we have 8c and minus 3c, right? Because the term or the operation to the left of the term is the one that carries that term either forward or backwards. So we have 8c minus 3c, and that's 5c. And we also have plus 6 minus 2. Plus 6 minus 2 is plus 4. We have a number line. We have 0. We have start out at 6. This is plus 6, and we minus only 2. We're going to end up at plus 4. So there we go. 5c plus 4. All right, question 7. We have evaluate parentheses negative 7 over 10 plus 0.15 in parentheses divided by negative 0.125. And our answers, you can see, are all in decimals. So what do? Well, I think we should convert this to a decimal. Decimals are really much more calculatable, so we can just use our calculator to help us out. And if we do that, well, let's just work through it. We have -7/10 plus 0.15. Do the math, just plug it in, get -0.55. Divide that by 0.125. What do we get? 4.4. Just plug it in, you'll be good to go. 4.4 is our answer. Okay, on to question 8. At first, question 8 looks a lot like question 7. We have, what is the value of -1/4 minus 1/2 divided by -4/7? But then we look at our answer choices and we're like, oh darn, they're all fractions. And fractions are not as calculator friendly or calculatorable as decimals are. So we're going to have to do some fraction work, but that is okay. We can get through this. So we have -1/4, and we're going to change this minus to adding the opposite. -1/4 plus -1/2. I know we're dealing with fractions and integer rules, but it shouldn't really disturb us too much because we know how to add fractions together, and we know that two negatives added together is just going to be adding the numbers and keeping the sign, right? So let's go ahead and get a common denominator. We'll turn 1/2 into 2/4, so that can talk to 1/4 more easily. Add -1 plus -2 and get -3/4, right? Because -1/4 plus -2/4 is going to get us -3/4. Add the numbers together, keep the sign when both signs are the same. And we have that divided by -4/7. So right away we have a negative divided by a negative, and we know that is going to result in a positive answer. We know that's going to result in a positive answer, so we know that A and B are not going to work because our answer is going to be positive. How are we going to get our answer? Well, we're going to keep, change, and flip. Just like 6th grade, we're going to keep, change, and flip. We're going to keep 3/4 is 3/4. I got rid of the negative sign because we know our answer is going to be positive. Change division to multiplication and flip 4/7 into 7/4. Multiply through, we have 3 times 7 is 21. 4 times 4 is 16. And 21 divided by 16 is an improper fraction, right? Because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. But we know that 16 goes into 21 once. If you have 21 and you can only go once into that with 16, and if you do, so it's like 21 divided by 16, you can go in there once, you'll have 16 and 5 left over. So that's how you get 1 and 5/16. 1 and 5/16, which is certainly a choice, and we're good to go. On to question 9, and question 9 is like question 8. We have fractions that we're dealing with. We're dealing with subtraction, and we're also dealing with division, and we have negative answers and positive answer choices, and it's not decimals, so we can't plug them into the calculator as easily, so we're just going to have to work through it, but we can do this. What is the value of the expression? Parentheses 2/3 minus 5/6, and parentheses all divided by 3/4. All right, so where do we start? Let's start by saying 2/3 minus 5/6 needs a common denominator for these guys to talk to each other. And we know that 3 times 2 gets us 6, and 2 times 2 gets us 4. So we're just going to change 2/3 into 4/6. And that way they can talk to 5/6 more easily. And we have 4/6 minus 5/6 all divided by 3/4. Well, if you do 4/6 minus 5/6, what are you going to get? You're going to get -1/6, right? You have 4/6 minus 5/6. You have 4 minus 5. That's -1/6 all divided by 3/4. And another way to write that is -1/6 divided by 3/4. Let's just stop and look at our answers. We have some positive answer choices and some negative answer choices. But here we have a negative divided by a positive, so we know the answer is going to be negative, and we know C and D are not options. Negative divided by a positive is going to lead to a negative answer. What do we do now? We just keep, change, flip. We keep 1 6, negative 1 6. We change division to a multiplication. We flip 3/4 to 4/3. We multiply through and we get negative 4/18. We simplify that by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2. We get negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And there we are, negative 2/9. That's our answer. And we're good to go. Okay, now question 10. Question 10, we have another mess of fractions, minusing fractions, or mixed numbers, minusing mixed numbers, and then divided by a decimal, and we're like, oh no! But look at our answers. Our answers are in decimal form this time, which means we can have a more calculator-friendly approach, and we should be in good shape. So, what do we have first? We have mixed number minus mixed number divided by decimal. What are we going to do to these mixed numbers? We're going to turn them into decimals. How are we going to do that? Well, let's just do it out. Let's keep the 3 the same because the whole number stays the same. As a reminder, 1 half, as in 1/2, is the same thing as 1 divided by 2. Plug that in your calculator, do it out by hand, you get 0.5. So keep the 3 of 3.5. 1/2, 1/2 becomes 1 divided by 2, which becomes 0.5. Same thing with the 9 3/4. The 9 stays the same, whole number stays the same. 3/4 is equal to 3 divided by 4, so 3/4 is 3 divided by 4. Plug that in your calculator, do it out by hand, and you get 0.75. And negative 2/5 is just negative 2/5. So now we have a much easier problem to work with because we can just plug in 3.5 minus 9.75 into our calculator, or we can do it out by hand and we get negative 6.25 divided by negative 2.5. We have a negative divided by a negative, so we know our answer is going to be a positive, right? Because negative divided by a negative is a positive, so it can't be a negative. And just plug it in the calculator. What do we get? 2.5. And we're good. Okay, on to question 11. Question 11 says, which expression represents the product of 3 and 5 over 4n plus 1 and 8/10? And we see the word product there. We know it means multiplication, so we know we're going to be multiplying 3, this term 3, by that term 5 over 4n plus 1/8. And we have another complication here too, because we have an improper fraction here and a decimal there. But we look at our answers and we're like, oh, our answers are in decimal, so that gives us a hint that we should change this improper fraction to a decimal. So what do we have? We have 3 times 5 over 4n plus 1 and 8/10. And that looks like a common distributive property set up, and we're good to go. We know this means multiplication, this parentheses means multiplication, and that's good because product means multiplication. So if it said sum, we would add them, but it says product, so we're going to multiply them, and let's do it. Oh, but first we have to change this to a decimal. So how do we do that? Well, just as we did before, we're going to say 5/4 is the same as 5 divided by 4. And you can do it in your calculator, or you can just do it out. We didn't do it out before, so let's do it. So it's 5 top number divided by 4. And we can do it out longhand, you know, it's a good little review. 4 goes into 5 once. 1 times 4 is 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. Got to do a decimal. Bring down a 0. 4 goes into 10. Oop, can't give you the answer. 4 goes into 10 twice. Well, I guess I'm going to have to. 4 goes into 10 twice. 2 times 4 is 8. Use subtraction, get 2. Bring down another 0, and you can see it's going to be 1.25. 5 times 4 is 20, and that gives us 0, so we know that is going to go there. 5 divided by 4, 5/4. 5 divided by 4, 5/4 equals 1.25n. And where's the n come from? Well, don't forget the n. We've got to bring down the n, and 1.8 comes down as well. Now we have a classic distributive property setup, and if we look at our answers, well, we see, I mean, this doesn't have an n, right? The n, the term of the n came down here, but this doesn't have an n, so we're going to have an answer with something with an n, and then a whole number without a variable. So something with an n, and then a whole number without a variable, Well, that's C and D. And what is our whole number going to be? It's not going to be 1.8 because we're going to have 3 times 1.8. So we pretty good idea what our answer is going to be. But let's do it out just to be confident. 3 times 1.25n is 3.75n. And then you have to use the distributive property, distribute that number before the parentheses to both terms inside the parentheses. Remember, the n carries forward with the first term with its coefficient. So multiplying 3 times 1.25n is like multiplying 3 times 1.25 times n. It's all the same term. This is a coefficient and a variable. And 3 times 1.8, you can do it out. Don't forget the plus. You can do it out long form if you want, but it's going to be 5.4. And a little trick here is that's, 1.8 is 0.9. So if you divide that, you get by 2, you get 0.9. And that's 0.9 times 6. Would be 54, so it's a little trick to do that quick, but you can do it out longhand if you want, or just throw it in your calculator, and that's going to be your answer. 3.75n plus 5.4. And we're good. Question 12. Which expression is equivalent to the expression negative 3 times parentheses 4x minus 2 and parentheses minus 2? All right, we know how to do this. We know the trick is this negative sign right here. That's going to cause some people some problems, but it's not going to cause us problems because we know what to do. So let me just rewrite it so it's bigger, and we can do this out. Again, as you rewrite problems, I see a lot of mistakes with people copying their answer to a piece of notepaper or somewhere else and them copying it wrong. So make sure you double check every time you rewrite an expression or an answer, just to make sure you're not forgetting a negative sign or doing some other simple mistake that'll lead you astray. Okay, negative 3 times 4x is negative 12x. Negative 3 times 4x is negative 12x. And this is negative 3 times minus 2. It's going to be a negative times a negative. It's going to lead to a positive 6. A lot of people are going to get that wrong, but we're not. We know this negative 3 carries forward to this minus 2 and becomes positive 6. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. And then you have minus 2x that comes down. What do you have here? You have minus 2x and minus 12x. That combines for minus 14x plus 6. Minus 14x plus 6. And we're good. Okay, question 13. The expression below is simplified using 2 properties of operations. So you have this expression, 5 parentheses 11z plus 29 plus 6z. And step 1, you have that. Step 2, you have that. So step 1 looked like they changed the order of the addition problem. Step 2, what did they do? Well, they added 11z plus 6z to get 17z, and that's good legal math. And step 3, it looks like they used they multiplied 5 times 17 and 5 times 29 to get 85z plus 145. Okay, so the question is, which properties were applied in steps 1 and 3 respectively? So what moves did they make to get the correct answer in steps 1 and step 3? And we have commutative property, then distributive property, commutative property, then identity property, associative property, then distributive property, and associative property, then commutative property. And we have to remind ourselves what we mean by these properties. So if you had forgotten, here's a little notepad, a little note. You can just take it right now. Associative property means that for addition, you can group numbers differently. So 5 plus 4 in parentheses plus 3, that'd be 9 plus 3 is 12, equals 5 plus 4 plus 3 in parentheses, or 5 plus 7, which would be 12, because you do what's in the parentheses first. Identity simply means a number plus 0 equals that same number. And commutative means you could switch the order around. So take some notes if you need it. These are definitions you need to know. And if we go back to our problem, it looks like the first step, well, what did we do? We took 6z and we moved it over there, and we took 29 and we moved it over there. So we're just switching order around. So the first step is commutative, so it's either A or B. And step 3, what did we do? Well, we took 5 and we multiplied it by that term and multiplied it by that term, where we distributed 5 to both terms inside the parentheses. So it's commutative, then distributive. We're not doing anything with the identity property. A is the answer, and we're good. And on to question 14. Explain the steps needed to determine the value of the expression shown below. Be sure to provide the correct value of the expression in your explanation. Okay, so what do we have? We have one fraction divided by another fraction plus a negative fraction. So what are we going to do first? You know, the order of operations tells us that we do division, because division comes before addition and subtraction. So let's just write it out. The first step is to divide 1/2 by -2/5, and I'll show you the answer, show you how I got it, which is equal to -5/4. The next step, now I have -5/4. This is equal to -5/4. So now what are you going to do? You're going to add -5/4 and -1/4. You're going to add them together, and what do you get? -5/4 plus -1/4 equals -6/4. So you get -6/4, and you can simplify that by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2, and you get -3/2. So you know your answer is going to be a negative, and it's going to be -1/2, because you can think of this as you have 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, right? You have 3/2. You have 3/2. So how many holes is that? That's 1 hole and 1/2 extra. So you have 3/2, and that equals to 1 and 1/2, and you know it's going to be negative. You can also do that as 3 divided by 2. You have 1 whole and 1/2 remaining, because you have 1 remainder, and that's over 2. Or, and that's the answer. I think that's good. That'll get you full credit. Or what you could also do, if you were so inclined, is you could say the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all of these into decimals. So I'm going to take this and have it 1 divided by 2, and I'm going to get 0.5. I'm going to take this, I'm going to have it -2 divided by 5, and I'm going to get -0.4. And I'm going to take this, and I'm going to do plus a -1 divided by 4 is 0.25. And then I can do the division and the adding of a -1/4, and I'll get the same answer, which will be -1.5. So whatever way you choose to do it, make sure you explain each step and make sure you get the right answer, and you will be good to go.